to welcome you here to what really is a vital session to talk about in more detail, but as we've just heard, more around AI and a digital economy and how important that is to the Commonwealth, and how we've heard about that this morning from the very first plenary through to the address from the Secretary-General, through to the call to action really from His Excellency the President of Zanzibar. You know, the AI is fundamental to the way we're going to work now across many, many sectors. And why is it so important? And why is it so important at this event, at the CTIS event? Well, because the estimate for the money that will be injected into the economy from AI is around 15 trillion, which is about the same as the GDP of every Commonwealth country combined. So at that scale, of course, we're talking about it, and of course, it's going to make a huge impact. And for the Commonwealth, it represents a huge unprecedented opportunity, really, for us to stimulate economic growth, to improve access to key services, and to realise really sustainable development across, you know, many, many countries, and in a collaborative way. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So we really do stand at the cusp. I mean, it started already, a cusp of a revolution where AI has the ability to impact so many sectors, our key sectors, from healthcare to agriculture to finance to, as we'll hear later, insurance, even down to gaming. So absolutely everything, including the legal aspects of how we work. So I think it needs to be, whatever sector you work in, this is a thing we need to be discussing, because we need to get this right, and it's a thorny topic sometimes to discuss. So we need to act fairly decisively. We need to do things responsibly. We need to do things with the right governance and the right ethics structures, and that's what we'll dive into today. And we've got a stellar panel of speakers who can cover all of those areas, from broad sectors, both public and private, with expertise in all of those different areas. So we've got the Honourable Nigel Feetham, the Minister of Justice, Trade and Industry from Gibraltar. We've got Danilo McGarry, who's a tech entrepreneur, an investor, and one of the, he won't say this out loud, but one of the top 20 AI experts in the world, as voted for by, experts in the field themselves. So we're delighted to have Danilo here. We've got Dr. Uzair Javaid, who's the CEO and founder of Betterdata out of Singapore, doing some fantastic work in important areas of privacy. And Fara, Ashiru, who's the founder and CEO of Okra, who building the really important infrastructure pieces that in Africa that we need to be able to run this technology. So if you'd just like to put your hands together again for our panellists. So I'm going to start by giving each of the panellists just 2 minutes to introduce yourself, talk about your expertise and experience in your sector, and also just one of the ways that AI is impacting you, just a first point as to how AI is impacting the work you do in the sector that you work in. And I'll start with Uzair here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Uzair from Singapore. My background is I have a doctorate in data security and privacy, so technically oriented. I do have a few tier 1 publications within the AI landscape. After I did my PhD, I started this startup called Betterdata. So we mainly work with banks and government institutions such as the US Department of Homeland Security. We help them with AI challenges that has to do a lot with privacy as well as data quantity plus quality. And in parallel, I have been advising the Singapore government on data privacy guidelines as well. So 3 guides. The first one was released in 2022, the second one in 2024, and the next one is scheduled this year. So all in all, technical background, I have worked with regulators, I have worked with customers, shipped products as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. So, how privacy and security are absolutely key areas, so we'll discuss that later.
Absolutely.
Fara.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Fara Ashiru. I run a company called Okra. We started primarily as an open banking infrastructure for the continent. In time, we realized that one of the biggest struggles we had was in our cloud infrastructure and the costs. And so we pivoted into building something called Nebula, which is cloud infrastructure for the continent. My background is in computer science. I'm an engineer by trade. I've been working with Fortune 500 companies building out software applications and enterprise software before moving into working with startups and later building Okra. Today we work with companies to help them have the cloud infrastructure necessary to build cloud and AI technologies, and we help drive AI adoption by doing that as well.
Fantastic. So again, having that infrastructure, having that vital data platform to be able to use this technology is crucial across the Commonwealth. Minister.
Thank you. My name is Nigel Feetham. I'm the Minister for Justice, Trade and Industry in Gibraltar. My portfolio includes responsibility for financial services and gaming, which are key economic sectors for my nation. I'm also the Minister with responsibility for taxation. I've been in office only for 18 months, but prior to being elected as a government minister, I was a financial services professional for 32 years. I am a barrister and King's Counsel by profession. I've also been a visiting law professor of a UK university and published a number of law books. The key theme in all of my law books, for which I have dedicated almost the entirety of my professional career, is the concept of jurisdictional competition. What is it that makes jurisdictions competitive far in excess and out of proportion to their geographical location and the size of the country in terms of population and every other macroeconomic factor?
Fascinating, and a fascinating portfolio to be talking about AI and digital with as well. Danilo.
Danilo McGarry. I've been in the AI world for 20 years now, former head of AI for Citigroup globally and United Health Group, which is America's 5th largest company, and it's the 4th largest AI program in the world. I own my own tech company. I help companies like Volvo, Siemens, BASF, and many banks also digitally transform. And what I've been dedicating my life to in the last couple of years is just really trying to teach people about AI. My team get access to AI systems 6 to 12 months before they go to market. And we see a huge jump in intelligence coming out in the next couple of months, which I think a lot of markets and companies and countries are not ready for. So I've dedicated my life really to just teaching and talking about it as much as I can, since I have a privileged position in seeing a lot of these systems before they go to market. So very happy to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Right, so maybe we just stay with you, Danilo, just thinking about that experience and the advice that you've given to, to companies around their AI adoption. What are the misconceptions that businesses have, and what should, if you're a business here today, what do you think the key themes are that you should be embedding into your work now to really profit from the AI tools that we're starting to emerge, but of course will become even more dominant?
I think there's many misconceptions, but if I can pick a few. One is just having the wrong mentality to change. There is, you've mentioned a couple of trillion there. What I know is, of today, there's 100 trillion committed to AI in terms of investment from the private equity, VC, and government world. And that's going to increase to 500 trillion over the next 5 years. There's 20% more money going into AI than into the greenhouse movement, the very thing that could extinct us. And I only see two outcomes out of that. Either AI is going to be truly everything it's supposed to be eventually, or it's going to be forced to be as investors and countries and people who have invested in this technology need to get a return on their investment. But the two scenarios are concluding that it will happen somehow. So a very large misconception I see is, oh, I won't do it now. It's advancing at such a fast pace. I'll wait until it becomes better. But as of, I would say, 3 years ago already, the technology is good enough to really augment any job in any industry. So there's no barriers in terms of a technical barrier anymore. There are also barriers. There are some things we can do more around infrastructure, but in terms of any company being able to adopt it, there is no barrier there. So the mentality around change and the vacillation that a lot of companies put in place, oh, we'll wait for this, we'll wait for that, not the right time, we're dealing with this, dealing with that. I'm seeing already companies lose market share because of competitors using AI. I'm seeing companies having issues with their cost structure because they're not using AI. So I see many industries changing drastically as a result. So that's one of the misconceptions. It's just the fear of change and thinking that it's not good enough. But I can reassure anybody who's listening, AI can pretty much augment any job available today.
Fascinating. And turning to you, Minister, in terms of the work that you've been doing in Gibraltar with the economy and with insurance and gaming and digital and AI becoming an increasing part of that. You know, what's your experience been, and what would your advice be for other Commonwealth countries looking to emulate the fantastic work that's been going on?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the Gibraltar economic sectors, you'll see that 50% of our economy is based on financial services and gaming. I no longer distinguish between financial services and gaming. I talk about the financial sectors. It's a large part of our economic contribution for a small territory such as ours. It means also that because we have a small labour pool in Gibraltar, we rely heavily on digital technology. Most of the financial services and gaming activities that are conducted in our jurisdiction are almost entirely digital. So I'll give you some of the figures, headline figures, so that you can see how out of proportion they are to the geographical size of a place like Gibraltar. 44% of all motor insurance policies sold in the United Kingdom are sold and underwritten by Gibraltar insurance companies. I mean, that is almost half of the motor insurance market. Why? Because you're not relying on a huge labor workforce. You're relying on the use of technology. In terms of our gambling and gaming capability in Gibraltar, 70 to 80% of all online gaming business in the UK is undertaken by Gibraltar licensed and regulated gaming companies. But this is a partnership with the UK. We are in partnership with our principal trading partner, and I'll give you some figures to demonstrate that. Gibraltar insurance companies almost contribute £1 billion of insurance premium tax to the UK Exchequer. That's one tax-related contribution. There are indirect tax-related contributions as well in terms of the workforce and the employment that is being generated in the UK, and therefore indirect tax contributions. In terms of gaming, Gibraltar companies contribute between 650 and 700 million pounds in betting duty to the UK Exchequer.
Wow, it's incredible. And just thinking on Danilo's point around every industry can be impacted by this, and your remit of having trade and industry, but also justice in there. What do you think the impact of AI could be in the legal space?
In the legal profession?
Well, yeah.
Well, I think it's transformational in every profession. I mean, even before I was elected as a government minister a year and a half ago, I was very involved in the insurance sector in particular. And AI and the application and the use of AI by insurance companies was already at an advanced stage, whether it was in terms of using AI to troll through data, which is critical in the insurance space, whether it's in relation to your interaction with customers and customer care, and indeed whether it relates to how claims are handled initially. So very transformational insurance. I was very involved in that before being elected into office. In gambling, I think we've seen less of that AI application in the gambling sector. I think the gaming sector in particular, perhaps, are not as quick as the financial services sectors have been, but I am told that that will change, and it will change dramatically over the next 18 months. We've seen how AI has impacted also in law firms and indeed in the criminal justice system. So I think everyone will be impacted. I mean, I must give you perhaps a personal anecdote. I spent a lot of my personal life, if you like, before I was elected into office. I used to spend most of my weekends writing and reading and delivering papers as part of my academic, if you like, interest. I mean, ChatGPT and Grok 4 does it much better than I will ever do it now. So, I'm not sure that I will spend much of my time writing the sort of papers that I used to write, but that doesn't mean that they will substitute the work that I was doing. If anything, they have actually educated me more, and I have acquired more knowledge through my interaction with AI apps than I used to have when all I had was Google. And I used to refer to Google a few years ago as the largest depository of knowledge and information in the world. Well, I think we can no longer say that. I think AI takes that first lead.
Yeah.
Or that first place.
I can tell if my children have cheated with their homework and used ChatGPT because it's too good. It uses words they would never contemplate using. And of course, if you're here in the audience and you're thinking, how do I benefit from these technologies and these advances in algorithms and generative AI, for example, we need infrastructure. You need to, we've seen the UK government make announcements in the last few months around scaling up data and data centres and computational power outside Oxford here. And of course, that has to happen for every Commonwealth country. So, Fara, just turning to you, and clearly that's where your expertise is and your engineering expertise is, how do we provide that infrastructure? And what are the challenges, the main challenges you've perceived or found in terms of delivering that infrastructure at scale in more emerging markets?
Sure. So I do think that, on the continent, especially in Africa, it really is an access thing as well. AI adoption is good for everyone. I mean, every business should have it at the end of the day. Every business is an AI company. You can argue Netflix is an AI company, right? Their best job is to tell you, what do you want to watch next? That's a recommendation engine. But if you don't have the ability to build that infrastructure, then, that's where the problem lies. And so, one of the things that we think drives adoption, one thing is, for instance, to have frameworks in set. So, sandbox environments, government sandbox environments where you can easily innovate on AI adoption, innovation ideas. And then also that means that you can make sure that these rely on ethical guidelines as well. I think we need more stakeholder collaboration generally as well. One thing that helped us really early on with open banking was that, when we started with open banking, it didn't exist on the continent yet. It didn't exist specifically in Nigeria. So there was no regulations that existed at that time. So what we did is we worked directly with the Central Bank of Nigeria with other startups to create what is now the open banking framework. And I think that we also need to incentivize businesses to build AI as well. So, with us, that's incentivizing businesses and investing in infrastructure, data centers. We have tier 3, tier 4 data centers on the continent. They're minimally used today. We have the environment and the ability to build these data centers. So with stakeholder collaboration, for instance, we're able to do that. And if we can incentivize businesses to build this through things like grants and tax breaks, and even flooding more investments into these sectors, I think that also grows in that aspect too. So then you are able to find, like, for instance, with Okra, because we were pioneering open banking, we received what was called the Pioneer Status Award, and that allowed us to have tax breaks and push forward with that innovation. So I do think that we need to focus on the ability and the access, and from our point of view at Okra, that starts with infrastructure and the ability for you to build, because at the end of the day, AI is expensive to build. It takes a lot of computing power, and if you don't have that access to that power today, you're going to struggle. And early adoption is good. I like what you said about Google and the fact that, Google was the largest depository of information, so therefore you could argue they should have been the largest AI company to exist today, right? But because they were slow to adopt, that didn't happen. So every company needs the ability to do that, and for Africa to compete, I think, in the next frontier, we have to have that access to that infrastructure.
But have you seen any evidence or any examples of more cross-border working? I know in certain sectors, in say the healthcare sector, it's very difficult for countries to store data externally, but in other industries maybe there's not quite that pressure. And are you seeing the fact that you can service smaller countries or countries that are geographically separate, but from a piece of infrastructure?
And that's, we work with data centers all over the continent, and we essentially build, cloud computing technology on top of their data centers. So we can power any size company, and we can allow them to have lower latency, for instance. Right now, over 90% of companies in Africa rely on offshore data centers, offshore providers. Bringing that locally adds to the affordability standpoint as well, and then it allows you to work with businesses. So we work with businesses in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, and Kenya, and they allow them to bring their data closer. You see governments all over the continent today, they want to implement multiple different local data sovereignty laws. You need to host your data, especially in healthcare, HIPAA, being able to host personal identifying data and so on. And so we allow you to do that locally to the same standards that you would expect, and then therefore allowing you to, the ability to experiment more, build more things. Because right now the cost of experimentation is high.
Yeah.
Most companies don't have the ability to test out their ideas, but when you bring that locally, then you're able to.
Great. And just as they're coming to you on a different strategy for things like healthcare data or for getting access to data is to work with high quality synthetic data, which has been one of your company's focuses. And can you just give us a little bit more of your experience there, the work you've done in Singapore, the work you've done in the US, and how that's really trying to combat some of those challenges, but also usher in things like cross-border working because it's a far safer data environment to be working in.
Yep. So I think just to share some background, in 2021, I concluded my PhD with a hacking experiment. So I ethically hacked the Ethereum blockchain, reverse engineered their encryption algorithm, got access to over 600 user wallets. So I had their private keys or their passwords, which meant I could go and get the funds out and no one would bat an eye. So of course I didn't do that documented ways to avoid that in my thesis. Afterwards, it really allowed me to kind of deep dive into the whole privacy engineering landscape. And one of the stats that I chanced upon back then was GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation in EU, enacted in May 2018. It affected upwards of 28 million businesses globally. 28 million. So that number itself just struck me, and I realized this is a very, very big number, and privacy is going to become an increasingly important topic in the next 10 years. So fast forward to today, when I look back to over 4 years of development and building the startup, I think all of us can now realize how big privacy itself is as a topic. And in parallel, or in addition to that, when we talk about data itself, another problem is the quantity. So all of the large language models, all of the frontier, open source, closed source models available in the market today, one can argue that they have exhausted the knowledge or the data available on the internet. A few reports, such as the Stanford's AI Index report, suggests that by 2030, 2032, the world will run out of computer vision as well as text or natural language data. So the question is, privacy is one thing, where you have privacy technologies kind of addressing the problem, but in parallel, we have data quantity as a problem as well. So once we saturate or once we plateau the scope of information by digesting all of the data available in the world, the question is, do we stop there or do we start to do simulations? We proactively think, we proactively simulate, and we proactively develop models that can predict all of these scenarios. So just some background on the work we are doing. It has to do with synthetic data. So right now, as of today, you can use, for example, ChatGPT to create fake NIC cards or identity cards just with a single prompt. And they are actually quite hard to detect. Or in other words, it's very difficult to say if this certain image is real or fake. So in our case, when we talk about synthetic data, we are not generating fake data. We mainly work with banks and governments to help them with their data that they already have, locked because of privacy reasons. So within our platform, we have AI models that allows them to train them, and after training, we generate artificial data. So the data we are generating is representative or reflective of the original data sets, but at the same time, all of the data is artificial, so it no longer belongs to real individuals. So businesses can use it without any compliance issues, and they can share it internally and externally. So we are working with one of the biggest banks in Asia. We are working with regulatory authorities in Singapore and Hong Kong as well. We are working with the US Department of Homeland Security. And one recurring theme for all of them is they want to create data sandboxes, but there is just a lot of friction in accessing as well as sharing data.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating approach, and for people in the room, from lots of different Commonwealth countries, the ability to then, I mean, that is a pipeline to collaborate effectively and to use that synthetic data because it doesn't have to be guarded by the same data protection regulations. They're a massive opportunity to really work together, and people will snap your hand off. I mean, I think what we've heard there is from Danilo, the ability of AI to hit every single industry, what some of those misconceptions are, but the fact that it is coming one way or another. From the Minister, that when you have the right strategy in place, your ability to use digital to strengthen an economy and to really grow, expand capacity, and some of the fascinating figures coming out around how much Gibraltar underpins UK insurance, I think it's incredible. And then from Fara, how we need, the infrastructure needs to be there. There has to be a way to run AI, and then from Uzair, how important privacy is. And I think across all those strands of that kind of pyramid, that we get the toss-up between regulation and innovation. I'm drawn to things like the AI's impact in drug development, where we've seen really positive things, but the other side of that coin is exactly the same technology could be used for biological warfare. So we need to have strong regulation there. And I'd be really interested in what the panel thinks about how we strike that balance, how we continue to do engineering and continue to do the things like making Google look almost like a technology of the past compared to ChatGPT, but in a way that's safe and ethical across all of the industries we're talking about. If I could ask Danilo what his thoughts are on that.
One thing I need to say is we're talking about AI in isolation, and actually there's a perfect storm happening, not just in AI, but we also have quantum computing advancing significantly. We have much more powerful processing chips, better memory, ability to store. We have incredible advancements in IoT devices, autonomous vehicles, humanoid technology. There's over 120 companies today with over $100 million in funding for humanoid technology. So when you combine all of these isolated but incredible technologies and you combine them together in the same era that we live in today, that's why the World Economic Forum has coined this as the fourth industrial revolution. Right? There's only been 3 other times in history where we've seen something that can cause a massive change in human history. So it's not just AI in isolation, it's all of these other technologies working alongside as well, and they also have incredible momentum and funding. So, I advise a lot of governments around the world, Fortune 500 companies. I'm very disheartened by what I see. I think a lot of people are talking about ChatGPT, and that's what they think AI is. But there's a far bigger world in the world of AI and in the world of tech, which is causing this perfect storm. What I'm also seeing is a game being played where I'm sitting next to the Minister of Justice here, I need to be careful. But there is a little bit of a game being played around talking a lot about regulation, but also recognizing the fact that if you over-regulate in your country, in your jurisdiction, you're actually going to hurt the competitiveness of your country. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. The AI summit that happened here in London a year plus ago, a big part of the summit was about regulation and AI safety, privacy, etc. When you look at the AI summit that happened in Paris a few months ago, there was almost very little mention of that topic, but more around competitiveness. So the narrative is changing, because I think, if we're honest, there is an issue with over-regulating as well. I'm on the EU Council for AI, so I help set the rules and regulations, so I'm well versed in this topic. And I think that, at the very basic level, we should be putting in place regulations to safeguard children, the vulnerable, making sure that they don't get adversely impacted by this revolution that's happening at the moment. But apart from that, I don't see a lot that's going to change, because it's happening too quickly, but also because of this conundrum around over-regulating and making your country less competitive.
Fascinating. Minister.
Yes, I agree with my panelist. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the greatest technological revolution the world has ever seen in terms of its impact and also the speed at which this is happening. If we look at the other previous industrial revolutions, we've got the first industrial revolution in the 18th and early 19th century. The focus there was the advent and the invention of the steam engine. Nobody tried to regulate that particular technology. What we saw was government rightly intervening when they had to intervene in order to correct the appalling working conditions of people in factories through the factories legislation and indeed through labor rights. We saw the second industrial revolution and the invention of electricity, and the focus of regulation there was health and safety in particular. Third industrial revolution, Google. Nobody, I think, would pretend or advocate for the regulation of the internet. What we have seen is regulating the use and application of the internet, as indeed we saw in previous industrial revolutions, whether through data protection, whether through laws with regards to data security. So I'm a big believer that we shouldn't rush into regulation. And if we do, we really need to take a step back, embrace AI as a tool, and look at principles-based regulation in particular. And a lot of work is being done through my ministry to see how we can embrace this technology in order to allow the technology to grow through our jurisdiction in a manner which is safe and secure. It has to be safe for the jurisdiction, and it has to be secure for ultimate consumers. Those are, I think, the two criteria. And if you meet both requirements, I think there is a huge opportunity here, both for AI, for technology, and indeed for jurisdictional development.
Fascinating. It's I think very comprehensive answers from both of you, and I think that's a sentiment that we've seen recently is that it is somewhat an unregulated space, and that countries don't want to stifle. They don't want to be the person who stops it. So I think really interesting perspectives on where that balance should lie. Just coming to you, Fara, I'm just thinking again in terms of, we've got a mixed audience here of government and private industry. What role have you seen that public-private partnerships can play in creating the infrastructure, but also, stimulating an AI economy in different countries? What is that? Do you think there needs to be partnerships between governments and private industry to deliver this in a sustainable way?
I do. I think something I mentioned earlier when I said there has to be more stakeholder collaboration. And what I mean by that is that, one of the things you said is that, with AI, you don't want to stifle creativity, you don't want to stifle innovation. And what sometimes happens where over-regulation comes from is the lack of understanding and not being very close to the problem. There's a difference between understanding the map and then understanding the terrain. A lot of times private sectors and businesses, they're working every day in these sectors. They really understand the terrain and what's happening, while government regulators are there to help map. And so with closer collaboration between the two, you can be able to make sure that you do meet ethical standards in terms of ethical standards in security. Cybersecurity is also something to think about, the safety, but then also making sure that you don't stifle innovation and you leave it to the companies that really have the technical capabilities to push those things forward. So I do think that one of the things that has to happen is that collaboration has to exist, but then there has to be the ability for companies to still be able to innovate, and I think that's where it comes from. Leaving that to the companies that are building.
Fascinating. And Uzair, how have you found practically the balance between you're a startup company a few years ago. You are innovating in a space that is fascinating, and working with with governments as well. And how have you found that balance between innovation and regulation? And how have you found it between different countries when you've worked in the US, with the US government, for example, but also with the government in Singapore? Mm-hmm.
So I think just adding on to what Danilo mentioned, there is this conundrum between what to regulate. So do we over-regulate or under-regulate? And what Fara mentioned, that there is a lack of understanding as well. So honestly, so far, I think the answer is no one knows what's happening when it comes to AI and privacy. I I still haven't seen privacy being used in production on a very large scale. And I'll just talk about privacy because that's my background. Now, one could argue that we have Apple. So Apple, one of the arguably most valuable companies in the world. They do claim they use this technology called differential privacy. So one could say, you know, this is privacy tech in production, so maybe they are using it. But one of our R&D experiments is how we can audit or evaluate privacy technologies. So long and short of it is we devised a mechanism, we ran it or scanned through the Apple's privacy mechanisms, and we still found violations. So what they are claiming is what's not happening, technically speaking. But just so it happens, Apple is Apple. They have the brand power, and we use their products as they are. So in my experience, another example is I won't name the country, but we are working with a bank, and the bank shares very strong, I would say, reservations against privacy tech. So they need some sort of assurances. Now, within that same country, we are also working with the regulators. So regulators are there to provide guidance. But banks ask them for guidance, and in turn, the regulators literally call me up to get some feedback. So they ask me about something, I tell them something, that something goes back to the bank as coming from the regulators. So there is this lack of understanding between the whole spectrum, so who is building the technology, who is using the technology, and who is regulating the technology. And I think a good balance for all of this is, I think one of the earlier points of Danilo is the right mindset. We all have to be somehow on the same ground when it comes to these tools, these technologies, and kind of build the right safeguards rather than over-regulating and under-regulating it.
Fascinating. Thank you. It seems to be impossible to have a panel and not mention the T word. So we won't break with tradition, and let's talk about it. I mean, some of the examples we've talked about on the panel, you know, things like ChatGPT have been very US dominated, and the US are clearly a massively strong player in the AI market, driven in some, you know, to some extent by the phenomenal infrastructure that exists there. But I just wonder what the panel think about, you know, is there an opportunity, you know, with what's happening in America right now, and countries looking to work more closely together and possibly sort of decouple themselves from that market a little bit. If the panel think there's an opportunity here, say across the Commonwealth, for us to collaborate in a different way and to kind of leapfrog some of the work that's been going on in the US and become, you know, genuine AI leadership globally. Danilo, welcome your thoughts.
So you make a good point. One thing just to add to that is also with DeepSeek and actually 12 other AI companies emerging out of China, you know, the same ideas around data privacy, copyright laws don't exist. And we're also seeing, this is public, so it's not private, but Sam Altman and other AI leaders in the US also asking Donald Trump to relax the copyright laws as well. Because it's very difficult to compete with an AI movement that doesn't care about AI privacy, copyright privacy, data privacy. A lot of the very good data is copyrighted. And if you have access to that, then the accuracy of your models are better. So that's going to cause, you know, big changes in the world of data privacy and also collaborations. One thing that I'm, you know, being at the roundtable earlier today and listening to the rest of the event, one thing that I'm itching to maybe this is premature, but to set up some sort of AI Commonwealth hub, you know, to bring representatives from each country, to have, you know, free resources for people to learn about AI, you know, for educators, the education sector can benefit from it. Also having, you know, in this hub, you know, ability for coders to be able to use AI better, to more, you know, productively produce software. It is something I'm considering, and if anybody's interested, let me know. I do have my own software company, so it's quick to spin this up. But I think some sort of AI hub would be necessary for the Commonwealth. You do have these global summits on AI, which are happening. Like I mentioned, the UK, Paris had one, etc. But it's very much everybody just announcing things and some things happening in the background, private deals, etc. But I think more of a collaborative movement is needed. And I do think the Commonwealth has a unique position here. 60% of the population is under 30 years old. This is a population that generally picks up technology faster than anybody else. And it's, in Africa, a lot of economy is done through mobile phones, a lot of payment transactions done through mobile phones. And with open source being available, you can download it on even a mobile device nowadays. I don't see so many barriers there. It could be a leapfrog moment for the Commonwealth countries. If they really grab this opportunity and unite, they could really use AI to leapfrog ahead.
And just thinking on that, and from your point of view, Fara, from an infrastructure perspective, things like DeepSeek being open source means they can be distilled to much smaller models that you could run on a mobile device, or you can run in rural settings. Maybe it's for community health visitors, community nurses. So the ability to take the technology that's now been built, like DeepSeek or like the hub could build across the Commonwealth, to expand the capacity of doing that, but without the need for open AI style size of data centres. I just wonder what you think the impact of that could be on the sector from an infrastructure perspective, but also for how that capacity could be expanded.
I think that it just drives innovation generally and adoption. Accessibility is key. And accessibility comes with infrastructure and the ability to run these things. Africa is unable to compete in many industries. We've talked about healthcare, we've talked about these industries, but just gaming, for instance, is one of my favorite things to do. But if I'm, today, Africa does not compete in any major gaming tournaments, and it's because our latency, we just can't. By the time you have logged into the server as someone in the US, you don't have the ability to kind of compete at that standard, and so there is an ability for even, markets to grow within Africa as well, even the gaming industry and so on and so forth, and that drives innovation on the continent as well, and it drives adoption and it drives usage. There's a whole other population, and our goal at Okra is always to essentially drive Africa, connect 1 billion Africans to the global economy, and that starts with access. And I think that the ability for you were just talking about leapfrogging. Africa was able to leapfrog Web 2.0 straight into mobile first, but there's a lower ability to leapfrog in AI because you either adopt or you die with it. Because at the end of the day, it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And so it really just depends on what we want to actually do about that as well. And so I do think that we have the ability to host things locally, have closer access to that, make that more accessible to the everyday person, and then therefore drive adoption and more ideas that come from just the general access that we have.
Yes. Right. One of the topics I think it's hard to get away from in this, and just reflecting on Danilo earlier talking about the disparity in investment in AI versus the environment, is the environmental impact that this perfect storm of technology could be having in terms of, data centers have a genuine impact on the environment. And if we're running very large models at scale, this needs to be taken into account. I just wonder, from the Minister's point of view, how you balance that across departments when you want to, grow a digital economy and really, do the fantastic things you're doing, but at the same time have responsibilities for things like environmental pressures. And does that factor into decision making, and should it?
Well, I think it obviously should, but I think after what we've seen happening last week, I'm not necessarily sure that is at the forefront of people's minds at the moment. And you did mention tariffs, the T word, if you like. I think we've got to move forward from what we've seen. Clearly, there is a major disruption in the global economy. But as a jurisdiction, and we're a small jurisdiction, we've been here before. In 1988, in Gibraltar, 70% of our economy was wholly dependent on the military of defense. In other words, MOD expenditure, at a time when obviously there was a UK MOD review which resulted in the closure of the biggest employer in Gibraltar, which happened to be the naval dockyard. That put us in a position where we had to look at other economic models in order to be able to generate the sort of wealth that we have created over the last 36 years. We looked at telebetting as an obvious opportunity. It was an industry that was waiting to be unlocked, given that as a result of telecommunications advancement, people could place bets from the comfort of their homes. We had the first major gaming company being established and licensed in Gibraltar in the early 90s. It happened to be Ladbrokes, which today is part of the Entain Group. In financial services, we entered into a common market arrangement with the UK in financial services that gave us the ability for companies to trade with the UK in equal trading partnership terms. We had the first insurance company established in Gibraltar in 2001, 2002. And one of the things that we have seen in terms of the economic development of our jurisdiction is to have first mover advantage, and also something that I've called in all the books that I've published, which is the herd instinct. All it really takes is for one big player to establish themselves in a particular jurisdiction, in a particular market, and then you've got other competitors then saying, if it's good enough for them, it must be good enough for us. And that really is, I think, the key principle behind the explosion that we have seen, not just in our own jurisdiction, but in comparable jurisdictions as well. And specifically, in the way that we develop AI, we've got to be careful not to inhibit the growth of AI through excessive regulation. We've got to think about what regulation should look like, and not only that, we need to also think about which regulates which piece of the puzzle. One of the things that we are doing as a jurisdiction now is to consider whether there are alternative ways of regulating this in order to establish our jurisdiction as a leading jurisdiction, as a cutting-edge jurisdiction in AI technological advancement, whereby essentially what the regulator does is to regulate through principles-based regulation third-party sponsors of the technology, and indeed the people that truly understand the technology, to regulate them through a system that will allow and encourage growth of these activities through a regulatory regime not dissimilar from what we have seen in other sectors of the economy, and in particular, the DLT crypto sector in our jurisdiction. Gibraltar was the first jurisdiction in 2016 to regulate DLT technology for the use by crypto exchanges, and we are now one of the leading jurisdictions in this space.
Fascinating. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to pivot to some fairly quick questions and try and get through them. So I'll start with you, Uzair. If you, in the next 12 months, if you could gift one AI innovation to the Commonwealth, what would it be?
So I would say open access data pools. If I summarize everything we just discussed today, those are the three key pillars to sustainable AI development are compute. So we have one player here. We have algorithms. I think Danilo is the one. We have data, which is my angle, and then policy or infrastructure, which is the minister's angle. So all of this has to come together, but within the Commonwealth, I think 56 nations, rather than consuming the currently available tech, why not we innovate by pulling in our data resources and building something tangible on top of that.
Cool. Fara, one gift to the Commonwealth in AI, for the AI space.
More access to innovation, so like incubators, hubs, pools, sandbox environments, allowing people that maybe never even thought about playing in that space too. And then that can in turn bring out great ideas across different sectors. We tend to concentrate our ideas within particular sectors. But there's a ton of innovation and AI growth that can happen across multiple sectors. So I think starting to, and also investment, definitely driving investments into this as well.
Cool. It sounds like Danilo's hub would help a lot with us this. This sounds like a great idea. Minister.
I think it's the gift of working together as a Commonwealth for mutual benefit and establish an economic powerhouse, if we have to, and put whatever the United States of America is doing behind us. We look forward, we work together, we have a common cultural and historical background. Let's make use of it.
Perfect. Danilo.
Oh, okay. I thought we wrapped up there. I would say that there is no more innovation needed, to be honest.
Right.
It's very odd for me to say that. We have everything we need in order to revolutionize companies, change company structures, reinvigorate industries. Everything is available today. So the biggest gift that I would ask everybody to give themselves is just the gift of not having fear and really just having an imagination. You know, go back to processor engineering. Just look at what your company does, what your governments do, and just try to reimagine how could it be with an AI super kick next to you. Because everything is available already. So there's no more innovation needed. The IQ of general AI models will be 250 by summer. That's smarter than any of us in this room, I'm sure. So innovation is great. It's going to get better, especially around algorithms getting more energy efficient so that we don't have to damage the environment as much. I was so worried about this that I actually invested in a solar energy company because I want to offset my carbon footprint. So that's why I made that investment. But I think we have everything we need. Just imagination and the right attitude is everything. We've got to push through now and stop just waiting for things to happen.
Fantastic. I think that's a lovely, lovely way to wrap up those two comments. So we've heard from a wide range of expertise, everything from the engineering side to the regulatory side, and what we need to do going forward in the Commonwealth to seize the opportunity. And I think it's clear that there's a passion and a positivity in the Commonwealth to push on and to do this and to compete on a world stage. I am incredibly drawn to Danilo's idea of a Commonwealth AI hub across all of those sectors with this level of expertise in all those different areas. And I think that would be, if the outcome of today's conference and this panel was that that hub was established through CWEIC, I think that would be an absolutely excellent thing for us to be able to talk about in 12 months' time. So if you could put your hands together for our panellists again, thank you very much. And a thank you from me for a thoroughly engaging session, and we really value your expertise, so thank you. I believe it's now time for a networking break, but I shall pass over to our compere.
Thank you, Chris. I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of this topic. And yeah, it's a networking break, 30 minutes. We'll see you back here at 4.